everyone, welcome to our presentation. We are going to be covering buildings and cities. That was done with David Mead on the Drawdown podcast series. It's going to be myself, Austin, and Rodrigo. So let's jump right in here. An overview of the topic. I loved this quote that Mead gave on the podcast. He said, "They, as in buildings, represent an amalgamation of best practices and new technologies." I feel like that just really shows kind of the breadth to this topic as a whole and everything that goes into it. On the drawdown ranking, a lot of the solutions that go into this topic rank fairly low, but that's because many of the solutions that are involved are counted in other areas. So if we think about rooftop solar, for example, that's counted in the energy category. So if we took all of those and applied them to buildings and cities, it really makes them key emitters and shows kind of the severity of this topic. Buildings produce as much as 40% of anthropogenic emissions. And anthropogenic just means released during human activity. This is a UN statistic based on one of the reports that they've done on climate change, and it really shows that it makes them key emitters. One thing to note, though, is that the statistic includes both direct and indirect emissions. And that's significant because we think about buildings themselves and everything that they produce once they're built and being used, but we also have to think about all of the emissions that go into just making them. So if we think about all the emissions from creating the raw materials, things like steel, concrete, insulation, refrigerants, all of the production of the things that go into building buildings create a lot of emissions themselves too. So urbanization, key topic here for sure. It's estimated that 2/3 of humans will live in urban areas by 2060. We've already reached the majority mark in 2008, but this kind of growth by 2060, as it's projected, is pretty significant because it means that we would be doubling the global building stock. And to put that into perspective, that's as if you're adding if you're adding an entire New York City every single month. So that's huge. Scaling up so fast makes it really imperative that we implement sustainable solutions now from the beginning. It's a lot easier to add those in at the construction phase than it is to create a building that's not efficient and then go back and try to retrofit it. This graph here, I liked this depiction. It only projects out to 2050, but you can see here in North America, you know, we've had a high urban population for a long time now, but there's some other areas like Africa here in Asia where we see that they're going to be scaling up pretty significant numbers really quickly. Areas of economic discrimination. I really appreciated that they included this in the discussion, and I think it needs to be part of more topics as well in when we're thinking about kind of everything to do with sustainability. So here with buildings and cities, kind of the main ones to think about are homelessness, gentrification, and affordable housing. So we're thinking about, okay, if we have these amazing, really eco cities, but who are they accessible to? Are they accessible to everybody? Or are they not? And I think right now the answer would be clearly there's some groups where it's not accessible to them. And so if we're really going to be sustainable, we have to be considering that and including that in the conversation. This is just a list of all of the solutions they covered in the podcast. Some of them you can see are super simple, like LED lighting, very easy to implement, but others get a lot more complex. And I'm going to pass it off to Austin and Rodrigo now, and they're going to kind of dig into some of these solutions a bit further.
Hey, thanks for that overview, Molly. Now I have the really cool responsibility to show you guys what California, and more specifically San Diego, is doing to achieve net zero energy. And a reminder of what that is, net zero, it's essentially when our inputs equals our outputs, right? It's when a building or a city is not able to consume any more energy than it is able to produce for itself in a given year. Now that's an amazing sustainability feat in and of itself, but what's even more amazing is that this is the largest save in all of drawdown, and accounts for 100 to 200 gigatons of carbon emissions every year saved through indirect and direct solutions. And California is a leader in this net zero energy activity, and the whole state calls that 50% of all existing buildings are to be retrofitted for net zero energy by 2030. But what's even cooler, us as San Diegans want to take that a step further, and we call for 100% renewable energy citywide by 2035, and that's retrofitting and that's new building construction. And it is really prevalent to see in these case studies that San Diego is a leader and really want to go for this net zero energy activity. And for the sake of time, I'm going to go over these really quickly. And mainly, I want to point out conceptually what these mean to us. So the LPL Financial Tower, it was the largest net zero energy building in all of America at one point. Now it's been passed up, and it's the largest in San Diego. But this really opens the door and like the imagination of possibilities of what we can achieve with net zero energy, because this building, as it saves so much money for itself alone, and of course reducing its carbon footprint, but the 3 fuel cells that the whole building is ran off of has enough energy to power 750 San Diegan homes. Now, if we can do that with the power in just one building, what are we able to do for our communities? And so that's really what I wanted to drive home with this LPO Financial Office Tower, is the possibilities of what we can do with net zero. Next, I want to talk to you about Nations First, and again, pause it and read the information. But what's cool about this is that an archive building is essentially a place that keeps important tax documents and really sensitive material, and as a paper material, right? And so they have really specific and strict requirements of humidity and temperature. Well, this building is completely net zero, so it shows us that even when we need to be specific and when we need to control an environment, that we can still do that with net zero. So it's kind of telling us that there really is no excuse for the things that we can achieve with net zero, which is very, very cool. Lastly, and just for the sake of time too, I encourage you guys to go look at this company, Stoke, especially if you are interested in a real estate development for the future. This company is taking over all of the San Diegan retrofitting and new building construction. Not all of it, however, for the most part, they are the company that San Diego is looking to. They are a sustainable building service that is just incredible. Their values, their structure, and I looked into some of the information that they have for their clients and sustainability objectives, and they are just amazing. So I encourage you guys to go take a look. Next, I'm going to give it over to Rodrigo, and he's going to tell you all about what we are able to do as individuals.
All right, thank you, Austin, and thank you, Molly, for some great information on buildings and cities. What I'm going to be getting into now is what you can do as individuals to help, have an impact on this issue and do your own part. First thing we're going to talk about is understanding the basics of the physics of what we're looking at. So that's going to be thermodynamics and entropy. The first law of thermodynamics states that anything in a hot state will move to a cold state, and entropy states that anything that is already organized will move to a state of disorder. What that means is that the energy that we create in our homes will tend to escape our homes, and it's going to go find a different environment to exist in. What that means is we need to do our research on how to conserve energy, and that means proper insulation, LED lighting, heat pumps, a lot of the solutions that we saw in Molly's portion of the presentation. You're going to want to have to look those up and then understand what you can do to make an impact when working on your own home. Next thing I want to talk about is obviously doing your part, actually, once you do the research, to actually implement it. That leads us into something called the sphere of influence. That is the impact that you have as an individual on this issue. We already talked about retrofitting and then putting in the money. Another thing you can do is spreading the word, letting family, friends, letting everybody know how important this is so that it can spread outside of San Diego. That's already doing a great job to the rest of the country. But the most important thing we can do is vote. When voting, we have to make sure that we're paying attention to propositions and measures that are going to dictate how cities are built in the future. As we saw in Molly's portion, there's new cities being created every single day, so we have to make sure that those are indeed already sustainable. So when you're voting in a federal election, that means you have a chance to influence the total narrative, influence people like mainstream media. And then when voting in local elections, that's when you really do make an impact, because what you vote for is what's going to get built in your own city. So we have to make sure that's sustainable. Basically, that's all we really had to say, guys. I hope everybody learned a lot. I hope everybody enjoyed this presentation on buildings and cities. And even though it seems daunting, we can all make a significant impact in order to curb this. Thank you.